Crazy ideas that actually worked. In some parts of the world, sunlight doesn't always reach, especially in the winter. So an engineer and an architect placed a giant mirror on the side of the mountain to reflect the sunlight. Alex too, who was a British student, needed money to pay for college. So he created a website with 1,000,000 blank pixels, each one costing $1. On the website, companies could buy a pixel to place their logo and a link to their website. It was really successful, and in no time, Alex earned $1,000,000. In 2015, scientists discovered that due to the sun, a city's drinking water reservoir was evaporating and had increased levels of bromate, which is from the sun hitting the water and can cause nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. So the solution was simple. They covered the water with millions of non-toxic plastic balls, which gave shade to the water and fixed both problems. Yard. A man found a dinosaur bone that was 250 million years old. A couple who bought a house in California found an anti-nuclear bunker from the 1960s. It was built during the Cold War and was 4 meters underground for radiation protection. One man found human bones while doing yard work. He took them for examination and they were determined to be bones from 1,000 years ago. A man digging came across a passageway that led to the pyramids of Egypt. He dug around 30 feet down the tunnel, and archaeologists confirmed that it was a tunnel leading to Egypt's oldest pyramid. In Iowa, a family found a mammoth femur in 2010. He kept it for 16 years until it was finally examined in 2013. Scientists determined that the bone was approximately 12,000 years old and belonged to a woolly mammoth. Everyone laughed at this guy's house until they seen what was inside. This guy served in the US military as a pilot for almost 30 years. When he retired in his 60s, he bought a small little house in San Francisco, California. But the problem was, almost everyone else in his neighborhood was super rich and pretty much lived in mansions. Because of this, his neighbors refused to speak to him and laughed at him when they seen him. One day, when he was sitting on his front porch, a bunch of rich kids showed up at his house and started making fun of him. At first, he was upset, but then he decided to invite the kids inside. And little did they know he was hiding the biggest secret in the entire neighborhood. But before I show you what's inside, I found this app that lets you prank your friends and family by dragging these stickers onto their text message to change it. Just press a button on my profile to get it. In his basement, there's a full-size flight simulator with millions of dollars. Homeowners who spent a fortune just for revenge. A couple that was in the process of a divorce in the 1920s made an agreement where the husband had to build a house for her that was identical to the house they were living in, but she didn't specify the place where she wanted it. So the man had it built in a saltwater marsh that was in the middle of nowhere. In a Seattle neighborhood, neighbors got into an argument about a small plot of land. The owner of the land was approached by his neighbor, who offered him a small amount of money for the land so he could grow a garden. For some reason, the landowner was so offended that he built a house. In the end, the neighbor moved because the house obstructed his view. In Argentina, Karina Cavana was rejected from her partner's mother, so in revenge she set out to build a house that would obstruct the view of the Basilica of the Blessed Sacrament from the home of the family that rejected her. 5 everyday things that prove our life is a lie. Mini carrots sold in supermarkets aren't really that size. They're cut to look like that and more noticeable to the eye. Hair doesn't grow thicker if you cut it or shave it. Many people think this because the tip that's left is blunt, which makes it appear to be thicker until it's finished growing. The taste of Coca-Cola changes when it's packaged in cans. The only container that it doesn't change taste is in glass, because it's chemically inert, which means that it doesn't affect the product. The gold medals in the Olympics aren't only made of gold. They're made of pure silver that's plated in gold, so they only actually contain about 1.34% of gold, which would be equivalent to 6 grams. Finally, for the longest time, people have been using bricks for their walls because it's sturdy, but nowadays companies can make anything look like brick walls. So if it looks like this, it may not be as sturdy as you think. The most brutal military drills. South Korea's elite army has to go into freezing water that's minus 30 degrees for training. And for 9 days they have to do combat training in the snow at extreme temperatures. In North Korea, the training's also brutal. One of their daily activities is to hit a piece of wood wrapped in rope 5,000 times and hit blocks of salt with their bleeding fists to make the muscles in their hands stronger. Part of the Chinese army training consists of wooden sticks being smashed on their backs, concrete blocks bursting in their arms, plates being broke over their heads, and being hit in the head and stomach with a hammer. Finally, military members from different countries have participated in this training exercise, where they have to drink snake blood and eat live animals. This training is a survival course for them to learn how to survive in extreme conditions. People who got stuck in the strangest places. Jamie Bracken Murphy was a young Irish boy who got stuck in a stuffed animal vending machine. He wanted to grab one of the toys, so he went in the machine, but couldn't get out. Thankfully, it was easy for them to get him out, and he was only in there for a couple minutes. A man named Cato Larson got stuck in a toilet while trying to get his friend's phone out. He didn't just reach his hand in, he went all the way in the toilet and he couldn't get out. He couldn't find his phone either to call for help. He stayed there for an hour until he was freed by firefighters, who had to break the toilet to get him out. Finally, a woman named Rosie decided to get into a washing machine for a TikTok. But her legs got stuck, so she had to call someone for help to get her out. She tried calling her friends first, but they couldn't, so she ended up having to get help from the fire department. Mysterious photos that can't be explained. In this photo, if you look behind this man's head, you can see a shadow behind him. The face of the shadow belongs to Air Force pilot Freddie Jackson, who had passed away and his funeral had taken place a few hours before. In this photo of students, you can see a hand that doesn't belong to any one of them. And although they thought it was a joke, many people think it was paranormal activity. This photo was taken on a bridge in Oakville, Kentucky. The shadow appears to be of a woman walking, and coincidentally, there's a story that a soldier murdered his wife and child near this location. After a family dinner, Mr. Cooper took this picture to remember. But when they looked at it, they seen a strange figure hanging from their ceiling. The craziest things found by airport security. In an Amsterdam airport, 200 bags of tarantulas were found. In 2015, a child was found in a suitcase that belonged to a 19-year-old girl traveling from Morocco to Spain. A couple from India were arrested at the airport for smuggling small bars of pure gold that they glued to their feet. At Shanghai airport, they opened a suitcase that contained live snakes, and in total there was 121 of them. 2 women were arrested at Liverpool airport for attempting to transport the body of a dead relative in a wheelchair. And finally, a tiger cub was found in the suitcase of a Thai woman traveling to Iran. She tried to make them think it was a stuffed animal because there were other stuffed animals in the suitcase. But in the end, the woman was arrested and the tiger was taken for special care. Fake beggars who got caught. A man in Colombia pretended to have a leg injury so people would give him money. He collected about $200 from people driving by, but one day the police offered to help him with medical equipment, but he refused. So they looked into it and it turns out he was lying. A beggar in China pretended to have 2 legs amputated. He moved around in this little vehicle where he crawled with his hands. But one day a man took off his pants to expose him, and it turned out he had both legs. 5 years ago, a pregnant woman from America who begged for money every day on the streets with her child was caught after someone taking a picture of her driving a Mercedes-Benz, and while she counted the money with a smile on her face. 5 animals that can kill themselves. Sometimes the horns of rams and goats grow so curved and big that they penetrate their skull, causing their death. Horses and donkeys can suffer from abnormal growth in their hooves. If their hooves aren't trimmed, they can no longer walk because of the pain, causing them to die from starvation. When turtles fall on their back, it's really hard for them to roll back over. When this happens, they usually die from too much sun, starvation, or attacks from another animal. During mating season, deers get into such aggressive fights with each other that their antlers get stuck together to the point where they can't be untied. When this happens and no one can separate them, the deer die because they're unable to eat. Finally, the deer pig is famous for its 2 upper tusks. The growth becomes so uncontrollable that it pierces the upper part of their jaw, and in some cases when they're really big, they could pierce their skull, causing their death. Dark secrets that zoos don't want you to know. Zoo pens are a possible source of salmonella, E. coli, and many other diseases, so be careful when touching the animals. Some animals can suffer from zoonosis, which they get from being held in a zoo that causes them to tick, groom excessively, and make them anxious. And to control it, they give them medication. When zoos have too many animals in very little space, they give them pills to prevent them from having babies, or they sacrifice them at birth. The food given to animals isn't always the best. In many cases, they're given processed foods, and animals like tigers who only eat meat develop dental problems and become anxious because they can't hunt. Finally, it's 50 times more expensive to keep an elephant in a zoo than to let it run free. The scariest booby traps in the world. Punji sticks were one of the most famous booby traps used in the Vietnam War. It was made out of bamboo sticks with a sharp point at the end, which were placed in deep holes that they camouflaged so nobody could see them. The goal is that the enemy would fall into the pit and the punchy sticks would pierce them. Cartridge traps, also known as toe poppers, were bullet cartridges that were placed inside a bamboo tube and a nail which they camouflaged into the ground with the tip protruding. When stepped on, the pressure of the bullet caused it to fall on the nail, igniting the primer and exploding. Finally, when the Germans were retreating from the cities of Europe, they made sure to place expensive works of art with explosives that would go off with the slightest movement. The trick was to leave the painting slightly tilted so that when they were straightened, they would explode. Photos with disturbing backstories. This photo was taken in 1986, just before NASA sent these 7 explorers into space on the Space Shuttle Challenger. However, a few seconds before takeoff, the shuttle exploded and killed the explorers. To this day, it's unknown if Princess Diana died from an accident or if someone planned it. This photo was taken in Paris just before the crash that caused her death. In 2015, this plane from TransAsia Airways crashed in Taiwan minutes after this photo was taken. The plane was carrying 58 passengers and ended up crashing into the Keelung River. The pilot said he pulled back the throttle on the wrong side and accidentally shut off the only working engine. This error resulted in 43 deaths and 15 injuries. This photo was taken in Thailand in 2004, right before an earthquake caused a tsunami that reached 100 feet high, and more than 200,000 people died. Here's what would happen if you fell off a cruise ship. In 2018, a British lady was on the Norwegian Star cruise ship when she suddenly fell off the back. As soon as the crew found out about this, they started a search and rescue for her. They also called the authorities, who sent water patrol, an aircraft, and 2 rescue boats to find her. After 10 hours, they managed to find her and quickly took her to the hospital. The chances of survival are slim, but she has several things in her favor. Because she worked as a flight attendant, so she probably knew what to do in this situation. Even though these accidents aren't very common, they have emergency protocols in place. If there's an eyewitness who can report what happened, the crew notifies the captain, who usually stops the ship and backs it up. The authorities and the Coast Guard are then notified, while the crew searches for the spot where the person fell off. If you ever fall overboard, it's important to stay calm, try to stay where you fell, don't drink seawater, and keep your clothes on. Here's how to become the world's first trillionaire. The competition to be the richest person in the world right now has been in between Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. But this could change in the future because of an industry that hasn't yet been started, which is asteroid mining. Gold, silver, palladium, platinum, and much more can be extracted from asteroids between Mars and Jupiter. For example, the asteroid 16 Psyche has enough supply of ferronickel for the whole world to last for millions of years. The person who starts this industry will make money like never seen before without even traveling that far, because there's valuable asteroids close to Earth, like the 162,173 Ryugu, which is estimated at $83 billion. So far, no one's been able to pull it off because taking things to space is really expensive. And the most important question is, how are they going to extract the metals from the asteroids? Sneaky ways airports get you to spend more money. The first thing they do is put the parking ticket at a high price. It's cheaper if you park at a nearby hotel or get a ride by a bus or cab. They also ask you to arrive early to avoid missing your flight. So after checking in and going through security, you'll feel relieved and ready to wait for boarding. And you'll also have plenty of free time to shop. Airports take advantage of this by placing lots of stores in your way, like coffee shops, convenience stores, and restaurants. Most commonly, more stores will be on your right, because most people are right-handed and they tend to look that way more often. Finally, you'll find eye-catching and spacious stores to attract your attention, so you can walk right through with your luggage, while restaurants and cafes will have a quiet atmosphere to make you feel more comfortable and spend more money. This man swam in a cave but never returned, and a few years later the police found out the shocking truth. After going through financial difficulty and being $50,000 in debt, Ben McDonald needed an escape from reality. He decided to go explore the caves at a nearby park called Vortex Spring. Even though a certificate was required to go cave diving, he jumped in the water in the restricted zone anyway, and 2 of the park employees seen him go into it, but he wasn't spotted at his house for the next 2 days. His truck was still parked outside of the park with his wallet in it, and none of his neighbors had seen him. The local authorities began a search and rescue in the entire park, but after weeks of searching, they still hadn't found anything. So they called an expert cave diver named Ed Sorensen. The police were sure he would find his body because he was diving deeper than they had gone before, but he couldn't find anything and the case was classed as an unsolved mystery, until a few years later when a park employee was mysteriously murdered. Apparently he had heard information about Ben's disappearance, which was actually a murder. The reason why none of Ben's remains were found is because they were removed from the crime scene, and the 2 park employees were paid by someone to leave before Ben returned to the surface. Many people believe he was killed because he got into illegal activity trying to pay off his debt.